According to the Forbes Agency Council, search marketing is going to change in a big way, with reports that Gen Zers use TikTok more than Google for their searches.
Well, the team at Social Media Examiner shared their 2023 predictions, of course, and short-form videos lead the way from Reels to YouTube Shorts, and yes, even on LinkedIn.
Podcast listening will also continue to grow. On BBC Sounds, there were a record 57.7 million plays of all content during the holidays. Newscast was the most listened to podcast, followed by You're Dead to Me, Sliced Bread, and Uncanny.
According to martech.org, online networking will get better and more immersive thanks to 5G rollout, in particular powering lifelike of avatars, incredible metaverse experiences, and 360 real-life video meetings.
Customers continue to be in charge of your marketing with privacy and peace of mind advertising with a purpose, personalization, and a more visual and interactive experience top of their priorities, according to searchengineland.com.
Well, listen to this. AI and machine learning will dominate and move faster within sales and customer service rather than marketing, from auto-translation to automated FAQs and virtual assistants, according to Google.
Research from the Content Marketing Institute suggests using low-cost, high-impact interactive will become key to marketing strategies. For example, interactive infographics, quizzes, calculators, assessments, interactive maps, or interactive videos.
And finally, brands that have remained loyal to TV advertising will start experimenting with streaming platforms, from lower-tier membership on Disney Plus or Netflix to free ad-supported TV services from Samsung and Roku. Wow.
Well, some big predictions for 2023, but then again, maybe, not unsurprising in many respects.
Not at all. So I'll begin with podcast and BBC Sounds as, do I qualify Roger as an expat, as a French national, spent most of his life in the UK, coming back to France? What am I to you? Am I an expat, or am I coming home?
Oh, that's a very good question. Ever since I've known you, Pascal, you've lived in the UK. So to me, you've now left the UK and become an expat. But I've always had a problem with the term expat. Actually, it's just a completely bizarre term.
Yeah, well, expatriate. It means like you're being excommunicated somehow from your local church. But we listen to BBC Sounds daily with my wife Denise, and I do listen to newscast a lot. It's a wonderful kind of half-hour chit-chat between journalists. It's almost like they finished the day's work and they're being caught in a corridor to quickly share the news of the day. I do also listen to the comedy You're Dead to Me, which I think is wonderful. I've not listened to Sliced Bread and Uncanny, but yeah, this idea of predictions of more and more people listening to podcasts is something that, to your point, is a safe prediction, isn't it?
It's a safe prediction, as is also safe to say that Reels and YouTube Shorts and TikTok and short-form video is going to be a big thing. You don't really need to be a genius, nor do you need to have a crystal ball to make that sort of prediction. Do you, really? Let's face it. No,
absolutely. I think what we're talking about is the the sheer volume of adoption compared to the kind of things. The one that I wanted to challenge, because I've seen it happen before, is the very first one you read, Roger, about search marketing and this idea of Gen Z using TikTok more than Google for their searches. And I think there's an element here of misrepresentation of the behavior and the stats. So what is happening is TikTok is used primarily by Gen Zers, as the article says, and nobody likes to be put into a box, So they are on TikTok a lot to be entertained, as a result to which advertisers use TikTok, as a result to which they are discovering your services for the first time, but they don't use TikTok to search. You and I have been pressure testing TikTok, and you could argue the search function is non-existent or is very, very poor. And this is where, all of us marketers, we have to use some element of be quite pragmatic, being actually even curious about what's behind the attention-grabbing headlines. And to me, that's almost like a false prediction. It's like saying to somebody, those who eat chocolate and love chocolate will eat more chocolate soon. And it's a bit daft, really.
Yeah, and it's a bit worrying for somebody to suggest that people would go onto TikTok to learn something Whereas, I mean, let's face it, whatever you might say about Google, on the whole, if you search for something, all their algorithms and filtering processes and checking processes mean that the answer that you get is very likely to be true or close to the truth. Whereas, you know, I've searched for things on TikTok just to test it out. And as you know, I work a bit in the financial services industry, and you can search, give me investment advice. And yes, indeed, you can find some guy in Illinois or some bloke in the Czech Republic or some girl in Australia who will be giving investment advice. But on the whole, that investment advice could be completely wrong. That particular individual is not registered to give financial advice under any regime anywhere in the world, and is probably talking complete bullshit and has just done this to get clicks. Now, if you were to Google the same question, you would probably get an answer that was very close to the truth, or at least it would put you in touch with a registered financial advisor regulated in the UK by the Financial Services Authority, or whichever country it might be. And I just worry that people, if they did switch search away from Google towards something like TikTok, that we actually are depriving people of knowledge rather than giving them knowledge, because they're going to be getting stuff that just genuinely isn't the right answer or isn't true.
And to your point, in Google and many others, search engine, do have, you know, a fair way to validate information. You know, where they look at authority, they look at, you know, obviously the source of the information, so on. It's imperfect, but it goes some ways to at least suggest, you know, this has been going through a number of steps before it's presented to you, not to mention the internet itself voting for its quality. I wanted to get your reaction on, it's fascinating. So you and I have spent a lot of time discussing AI, machine learning, and automation in the world of marketing. We had our own test of ChatGPT, the platform that's still making the headlines right now. But interestingly, it would seem as though this idea of, you know, creating information and responding via a machine is going to be used primarily in sales and customer service more than marketing, suggesting that creativity is still something that the machines can't quite do.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. I mean, you know, we did, as you say, we tried out ChatGPT. And funnily enough, over the Christmas period, I've watched a few YouTube videos about people playing around with ChatGPT. And one of the areas it does seem to work pretty well is just answering mundane questions. And yeah, that you know, you don't need to be a major creative force to answer a mundane question. You could argue that you might want to make the style in which you answer that question a little bit more lively or chatty or whatever it is, depending upon your audience. But I still don't believe that ChatGPT or whatever comes next, or any iteration of these AI things, will be able to totally replicate the creativity of the human mind. And yes, we might start using these things to give us prompts, to give us ideas, to give us outlines of, say, an article or a script, but that will be pretty bland and pretty mediocre. And we still need a human mind to put our own flavors and our own stories and our own personality over the top of that. And I think that the people who just take the bland and the mediocre from these AI platforms, we're just not going to stand out. They will just become a mass of mediocrity. Whereas the people that do use AI to give them the prompts, but then build on that with their own personalities, those are the people who are going to continue to shine and continue to stand out.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. You know, the technology is meant to support us, not to replace us. But I would say with regard to that lower tier customer service or even sales activity, where someone goes, well, you know, we've had the example of the chatbots, you know, on social media and more. There's going to be a lot of that going on. Very quickly then, to wrap up on this 2023 prediction and in the news, the metaverse is going to become incredible, according to the experts, Roger.
No. One of my predictions for 2023 is that by the end of 2023, we won't all be in the metaverse. There is still so much BS talked about the metaverse. And yes, you know, again, the other day I saw this news report from some company in Japan that's come up with a slightly different shape of goggle that you can put on, and there's even one that goes over your mouth as well to give a better sound quality, so that people can go into these 360-degree meetings. And I'm just thinking, no, they don't want that. People don't want that. You know, a lot of people now are having Zoom meetings and are giving each other permission to turn off the video, so that it's more like what we used to call a phone call, you know, without the video, because people don't want to be scrutinized all the time. I just think that the problem with the metaverse still is there are a lot of people out there creating solutions to problems that don't exist. They haven't done the research. They haven't identified a customer issue that needs solving with a 3D environment. And therefore, these things will fail until we start going back to the basic principles of marketing, and that is find out what the customer need is and build a solution to that customer need, rather than thinking, here's some fab technology that we desperately want to get out there, so let's just do it and see what happens.
No, and for me, the metaverse and all the others, you know, the close cousins to that, they're going to have an amazing impact in other walks of life. I'm thinking sciences, I'm thinking potentially education and so on. But in terms of business, what I believe is the case, because we and I reviewed that recently on the episode of Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast, it's going to be short, sharp, incredible experiences, but you'll be in the metaverse to the tune of minutes. That's what's going to happen. It'll be an event of sort, and then you'll come out again and think, and the brand will get the recognition. Think of it as, you know, like you're now back in our days of starting marketing, a PR stunt in the streets of London or Edinburgh. That's going to be the equivalent. It was short, sharp. It made people stop. People on the bus took pictures, put it on social media, but they didn't spend, you know, the entire day executing the PR stunt. And I think that's where perhaps the metaverse, from the brand positioning point of view, is going to find its rhythm, but not to invite someone to spend the duration, for example, of a virtual conference in the metaverse, apart from, you know, very dedicated people. And actually, just closing on that, the individual that I saw doing a test of being in the metaverse was complaining that at the end of each day they had massive red marks around his forehead and his eyes because of the goggle that he had to wear. You know, so that's not going to work so much. Anyway, thanks very much, and I loved hearing your reaction. For you viewers and listeners, you've kind of heard Roger and I do the list of predictions. Have you got some extra ones you want to share? Please let us know. And what would you say is your favorite from the list that you've heard a moment ago? And we begin with a report that online sales rose by almost 1/5, 18% year on year on 16 January, also known as Blue Monday, which is often referred to as the most depressing day of the year, according to an old PR stunt by a travel company.
Music streaming platform Spotify has become the latest tech business to confirm it will be laying off staff after its CEO and co-founder Daniel Ek admitted to expanding too quickly. Around 600 jobs will be affected as part of the decision, some 6% of the overall workforce.
Okay, well, the UK's least affluent families have seen their spare cash fall by £39 per month, a 8.3% drop as a result of the rising food inflation, including middle-income homes are 40% worse off, Roger, each month, a 3.7% decline on their discretionary spend.
And Tesco's chair is facing a backlash after accusing food companies of using inflation as an excuse to bump up prices further than necessary. John Allen told the BBC on Sunday it was entirely possible food producers were taking advantage of the poorest in society.
Twitter is introducing a paid subscription more expensive than Twitter Blue. Elon Musk has tweeted, of course, that Twitter will be introducing a higher price subscription that will have 0 adverts.
UK marketing budgets continue to grow in the last 3 months of 2022, despite high levels of pessimism as marketers faced a recessionary 2023. That's from the latest IPA Bellwether report. A modest net balance of 2.2% of firms increased their total marketing spend in the fourth quarter of 2022.
Now, McDonald's latest campaign, Fancy a McDonald's, #RaiseYourArches, achieved an exceptional brand recognition score of 98, according to data from effectiveness firm System 1. Now, the ad follows a group of office workers using a knowing raised eyebrow signal to communicate an invitation to get McDonald's food without saying a word, nor showing the food or the restaurants.
And finally, Netflix outperformed subscriber expectations as CEO announces departure. Netflix added more than 7 million subscribers in its fourth quarter as its content slate outperformed expectations in the last months of 2022. Now, Pascal, have you seen this McDonald's advert?
I have indeed, yes.
Now, I have a love-hate relationship with TV ads, as you know. So many of them are incredibly annoying. In fact, a lot of our adverts are incredibly annoying. At the moment, every time I watch a YouTube video, I get this advert for life insurance coming on board. And it really annoys me because some of the stuff that they're saying in the advert is actually untrue, and I know it to be untrue. And every time it comes up, which is like every time I watch a YouTube video, I feel I need to complain about this. But this McDonald's advert is absolutely brilliant. I really, really like it. And you know, if somebody was to said to me, "What's your favorite TV ad?" I tend to go back to the 1980s, like the Smash Martians or Shake and Vac. You know, do the Shake and Vac and put your freshness back. But this advert, for some reason, just absolutely hits the spot for me. As you said when you read it out, there's no real mention. Actually, there's no mention at all of McDonald's. I think they use the logo right at the very end, and somebody might actually draw the logo on a post-it note. But the rest of it is just a load of office workers who look as if, to be perfectly honest, like they're pretty bored with their life, and somebody sort of just raises their eyebrows. Now, it's synchronized to the beat of this music, and the music sort of goes bam bam like this, and every time the music goes bam bam, their eyebrows go up like that, so it's bam bam. And of course the eyebrows mimic the shape of the McDonald's logo, and one by one this whole office sort of does their eyebrow rousing thing, and before the end of the advert they're all piling out the door, obviously on their way to McDonald's. And there's something sort of quite joyous about it. I mean, I hate McDonald's food. I've never been for a long, long time because it's just gruesome to eat. But this advert absolutely hits the spot for me. And there's some beautiful flourishes in it as well, Pascal. There's one bit where they pass by a meeting room. There's a lady doing a presentation, and the first shot shows her sort of with a flip chart behind her. On the flip chart behind her are the words depressed and despondent and fed up, bored, and then somebody does the eyebrow thing, and then the next thing they cut to her again, but the flip chart behind her is elated, super, full of fun, and all of this, and I think it's just an absolute work of genius. Now you're going to tell me you hate it.
I've hated most adverts until that one. So what I used to hate about McDonald's adverts, I mean, to begin with, I don't particularly care for their food, but also the experience. So a few months ago, we had a power cut here, so we couldn't cook, and we were kind of stuck, and we didn't know where to go to eat. And eventually, because it was so late, the only option, because they opened late, was to go to McDonald's, and the whole experience was awful. You know, you can't order at the counter. You have to use those kind of ghastly touchscreen full of someone else's kind of dribbles on it, and then you have to wait, and they call a number, and then they slap the tray on your plate, and it's warm because it's taking too long to get served, and so on. So the whole thing is awful to me. I've also really disliked the whole premise, because this campaign, do you fancy McDonald's? There's a term, you fancy McDonald's. It's been going on for a few years, where they were saying, you know, we're going to get families get together, we've got friends going to be together. We are the only, you know, option you have at the weekend and holidays and so on. I used to absolutely hate those statements, but this one, back to actually the very first news item that I read about this idea of January being a tough month, you know, with moods and the news being so depressing around the world and so on. I think the fact that they went for something that was comedic was really, really good fun. I struggled, to be honest with you, to be happy as a purist of them using the "Oh Yeah" from Yellow music from Ferris Bueller's Day Out, but you know, I'll forgive that. But in terms of the concept, the storytelling, and the build-up, and so on, and this idea of a movement of, you know, find a way to reclaim joyous moments, and yeah, I'll have to turn a blind eye to the fact that a burger can do that for you. I think in terms of the execution, the tapping into the mood of the moment, but also moving away from the claims of, you know, we are here to get your family to be together or to kind of find each other again or friends. I think that's a very, very smart move indeed. I'm still not going to go to eat a burger, but I think from the point of view of an advert that's going to be entertaining and not too disruptive, where almost like when you go on YouTube and I've complained about too many adverts. We'll talk about Twitter, no doubt. I think that well done, well done.
No, it's good. And the rest of the news items today, I sort of noticed a trend as I was copying and pasting them. On the one hand, we're in a pretty pickle at the moment with the cost of living crisis across the world. People are struggling. And I think that's reflected in what the news is saying, is that some areas we're seeing sales reducing. But it's also quite interesting that marketing budgets seem to be continuing to grow. And the Bellwether, report that was highlighted there is saying that some firms are increasing their marketing spend. And I feel quite buoyant about this because it's one of the things that we've often said on the show, that in a recession, when everybody's cutting budgets, wouldn't it make sense to be the one that doesn't, and to actually increase your marketing budget? And maybe finally that penny has dropped, Pascal.
Yeah, because historically, I was certainly in the receiving end of, being called into the office to be told you have to find ways to reduce your marketing budget after it had been signed off, that kind of things. Or, was it marketing and training, the two things that people wanted to. And I think that clearly people are understanding that, to reduce your communication efforts at a time where people are making decisions to buy less, whatever they buy will be born out of, a carefully considered and informed decision. You've got to be communicating. You've got to be supporting, the customer throughout their decision-making process.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. And the other thing I wanted to mention was this whole idea of Blue Monday. Now, it says that online sales rose by over a fifth year on year on the 16th of January, but that's not the news item. What I wanted to focus in on is this whole thing about Blue Monday, because when you read the mainstream media now, Blue Monday is absolutely a thing. Everybody, there were people posting on LinkedIn, it's Blue Monday today, but don't feel too depressed, blah, 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 blah. People are posting on Twitter, it's Blue Monday today, and we shouldn't be too upset because actually there's a lot of shit going on in the world. But to be perfectly honest, we should have a positive outlook. But if you trace back, and you said this in the news item, Blue Monday was a marketing campaign. It was actually started by Sky Travel back in about 2003, I think it was. Sky Travel ran this ad campaign and it was called Blue Monday. And the whole point was to get people just after Christmas to book holidays. And it's one of those things that's become a thing. Even though it was originally a marketing campaign. So now everybody talks about Blue Monday as if it's there's some genuine science behind the fact that the third Monday of January is the worst day of the year for everybody, blah, blah, blah. But it isn't. And there's no science behind it at all. It was a marketing campaign that everybody's adopted as an actual thing. And to me, that is, rightly or wrongly, proof that marketing can actually create change. It's like, you will do the hoovering in the house, even if you're using a Dyson. I'm going to go and hoover the house. That was an example of a brand name becoming a verb, wasn't it? And Blue Monday has become a thing, and I just think that it's remarkable.
Yeah, well, I've got some insider information for you, because as you may recall, I started my career in the travel industry as a young marketing officer. Now, interestingly, Sky Travel essentially used a bit of an established kind of marketing sales technique, but made it both a PR stunt, but also backed by science. They actually got a professor from local university to do a formula as to why, that the third Monday of the year was the most depressing one. And it was all in jest. It was all a big joke. But actually, the scientific community got quite upset, thinking,
yes,
how dare you? Now, when we used to work in travel, we used to plan, obviously, our special offers, our marketing campaigns. I hasten to add, it was way before the internet. So it was what we're going to put in the newspapers, on CFAX, and so on and so forth. And the calculation was that people would have had quite an expensive November, December. probably an expensive start of January. So they've been tightening their belts all the way to the moment they get paid at the end of January. So what you would do then is start to push your special offers the third week in January, saying to people, wow, what a terrible month we're all having. Treat yourself, book yourself a holiday now and look forward to going to the sunshine in May and June. So it began this, and then little by little, it morphed into something. And what Sky Travel did very cleverly, saying, well, it's an industry-wide technique, but I'm going to give it a label. I'm going to start to really give it some substance, and I'm going to have fun by asking a scientist to create a formula which was shared. And that thing just went like wildfire. And then other industries start to, it's a bit like, is it Black Friday, Cyber Monday? It morphs into something very different. So then other industries said, oh, it's the most depressing week of the year because people have no money, therefore we need to do something. And it kind of got carried away into something else. But yeah, that was something that was simply down to audience analysis, behavior, and thinking, well, they're going to get paid next week, as in the fourth week in January. Let's begin now to push the special offers so that when they want to buy the holiday because it's cold and it's wet and miserable in the UK in particular, then they'll choose us and not the others.
Absolutely. So everybody who's watching, everybody who's listening, Blue Monday is an absolute con, a complete and utter con. We've all been had. Here's the thing. Blue Monday isn't a day in January. Blue Monday is an absolutely fantastic single by a group called New Order, and everybody knows it. Yes. It's a do, 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 do. That's all you need to know about Blue Monday.
And we begin with Boots, who's launched its biggest ever healthcare campaign. Our health is as individual as we are, in support of women of all ages. The campaign combines TV, digital display advertising, print, social, in-store and online.
Morrison's is executing another round of price cuts in response to the cost of living crisis as a price war continues amongst UK supermarkets. Price reductions of almost a fifth on average will take place across a further 64 products, representing an additional investment of $25 million.
Costa Coffee has hired former marketer 𝗝𝗂𝗏𝗄𝗏 as its new CEO, who will start in April and succeed Jill McDonald, who left the business last summer to return to fast food chain McDonald's.
Yeah, Jill McDonald leaves to go back to McDonald's. There's something incestuous about that, isn't there? Amazon has decided it wants staff to work from the office the majority of the time, informing employees they are to do so at least 3 days a week from May the 1st.
While to reduce avoidable food waste, the Co-op has removed best before dates from over 150 fresh fruits and vegetables products this week. The decision follows a trial on 20 products last year.
According to Impression's survey of 1,000 UK-based senior marketers, over two-thirds, 68%, of SMEs plan to increase their overall marketing budget in 2023, with more than half planning to invest more of that budget into brand awareness activity.
While data from media agency Spark Foundry suggests that 56% of consumers reported using social media to make a purchase in the 3 months to the end of December, up from 48%.
And finally, in the last year, interest in environmental issues has dropped by almost a fifth, well 19% actually, amongst UK's Gen Z, which has 16 to 25-year-olds, as the near constant cycle of negative news causes crisis fatigue. So Pascal, let's stick with that last piece of news there, this whole issue of crisis fatigue. Do you feel crisis fatigue? I think I do. Every time you look at the news, whether it's online newspapers, print newspapers, whether you're on a TV news program, it's all negative, isn't it? We've got obviously the horrifying war in Ukraine, but it's all one crisis after another. In fact, we use the word crisis so much more now that everything seems like a crisis. I mean, at the moment in the UK, we have got a tomato and pepper crisis because apparently there are no tomatoes and peppers left. That could be down to Brexit, or apparently it could be down to some storms in southern Spain, which have destroyed tomato and pepper crops this year. Do you feel crisis fatigue's real?
Yeah, and I think it's to do with the complete imbalance with regard to the media, whether it's online, whether it's in print and so on. And that's something that you and I can observe because we have the luxury of history. We can look back at 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and 30 years ago. And the way in which the news, so desperate, and I mean news, I use the term globally, Roger. I talk about anyone needs, to gather someone's attention. They're so desperate for that attention. They are so ill-equipped actually to even understand what people want to hear about, that they're going for shock, they're going for headline grabbing, they're going for clickbaiting, they turn to ChatGPT to do some 10 different versions of the same news article. And little by little, I talk to friends and family, and everybody is removing themselves from TV, from newspapers, and from social media.
Yeah, I think it's right, and quite a lot of the time, it's actually the language that is used, isn't it? The word crisis is so overused now. I remember back to the beginnings of the pandemic when the word unprecedented, everything was unprecedented, wasn't it? and crisis, and it just eventually these words worm their way into your head, and it does create that fatigue. And I think you're right. People are turning off. I mean, I've had that conversation with a number of people as well, as one of the only ways to feel mentally secure at the moment is just not watch the news, because the news is guaranteed to get you feeling really pretty down about everything. So we really need to start looking for positive things out there.
Well, that's what we do on this show, Roger, of course.
Absolutely. So let's have a look at another item that we spoke about there. Again, it's slightly related. We've said to a certain extent some people are turning off social media, but according to this Spark Foundry, 56% of consumers are now using social media to guide purchases, which is up again from the previous year. Now, I remember years and years and years ago, and I'm going to get this wrong because I've only just thought of it and I haven't had a chance to look it up, but I remember Google coming out with something called, was it something like the 0 moment of truth?
That's correct, yeah.
When somebody, I want to buy a new car, I want to go on holiday, I want to buy a new washer, whatever it is, and you go to Google. And that's your 0 moment of truth when you start the purchasing decision. You do the Google search for the item you want to purchase. Well, now it appears that the 0 moment of truth has moved away from Google to a certain extent, and people are diving into TikTok, diving into Instagram stories or whatever it is, and starting the purchasing journey on social media.
Yeah, well, I think the data probably suggests that's where people spend most of their time, not discounting what we just mentioned about a desire to have access to positive news. I mean, when it comes to social media, people really, what they're saying is, I want to hear from my friends and family. I want to hear from my contacts. I want to smile. I want to be entertained. I want to kind of chuckle at someone's kind of, post and that kind of things. And then, so if, if you look at your time budget is spent on social media, then of course, advertisers and brands are going to be using that to their advantage. When the advert or the message is in tune with the platform, with the context, so they're using wit, they're using good timing and so on, and they avoid that kind of crisis-led messaging, I suspect they're going to be very, very successful. I think what would be interesting is what happens next year, so looking at 2023 data, but yeah, I think that makes complete sense to me.
Moving back to one of the earlier items we discussed, Morrison's is introducing some more price cuts, and we've seen price cuts across UK supermarkets, and there is indeed in the UK a price war in the supermarket space at the moment. Now, it feels as if that's something that's passed me by because everything seems so expensive at the moment. But one thing that I have noticed, and I'd be interested to get the France perspective on this from you, Pascal, is that yes, some prices are coming down, but quite a lot of these manufacturers are playing this tricky game where they actually reduce the size of things as well. So you might be paying a smaller price, but they've also shrunk the packaging. So you're actually getting less for your money. And sometimes, and I've noticed this especially with things like Twixes or bags of crisps, is that the price stays the same, but the packaging actually gets smaller. And I've noticed particularly recently that some of the chocolate bars and some of the crisp packets that we used to have are now significantly smaller. I even joked with Tricia the other day that eventually we'll be buying individually wrapped crisps from some of these manufacturers. Is this happening in France as well? Are you getting price reductions? Are there price wars in the equivalent supermarkets in France? And do they do this packaging reduction thing as well?
So we don't have price reductions in France. And what is interesting is, because I listen to both the French news and the UK news, is there is a strange thing happening right now in the media whereby supermarket chains are being accused of not paying a fair price for what they're purchasing from the farming and agriculture sector and the food producers. So I think for us in France, the price was already on the high side. The one way we used to kind of satisfy ourselves with Denise, my wife, was that, well, if you do the exchange rate game in your head, that bag of crisps is not that expensive after all. But actually, it was more expensive than in the UK. So we don't have the price reduction. We are not yet getting the issue of shortage. And I think it's because, we are getting the supply from the rest of EU countries in particular. And more importantly, there's also a culture of buying at the market and buying from the local greengrocers, as opposed to going to the supermarkets all of the time. So it's fascinating to observe as someone that's coming back to France after 32 years in the UK.
Yeah, I did read another article recently that did suggest that actually in the UK we've had it so good when it comes to food prices for the last couple of decades that we've got used to really, really cheap food, whether that's vegetables, whether it's meat, whatever it is, we've got used to really cheap food. And actually now, as a combination of Brexit and different structures and obviously weather events, we are now realizing that the time has come that food prices are going to increase. So maybe there's a lot of spotlights on this is a big Brexit event, this is a big problem, but maybe it is just an equalization of something that we have taken for granted.
It's so multifaceted. And it's not much fun, no matter whether you're unique in France and so on at this moment in time. And I think where the brands are going to win is actually when they present themselves in a way that feels very honest and ethical. And I'm in two minds about that news, about the co-op, what they're doing, the best before dates and so on. So can you actually engage the audience in a way that is honest, that is, in tune with the current period of time, and be part of, the chosen network of allies at this moment in time?
Yeah. Some fascinating news items there, Pascal. And I'm tempted to talk about Amazon wanting everybody to stay in the office now rather than working from home. And I do wonder, well, there's so many people who work for Amazon working in factories packing things up, so there's no way they can work from home. But we'll not go into that because we need to move on.
Days after the UK government banned TikTok on work phones, the BBC has urged staff to delete the Chinese-owned social media platform from corporate devices over privacy and security fears.
Diageo has launched a global campaign for rum brand Captain Morgan as it looks to make responsible drinking a social and cultural norm. Enjoy Slow features singer and rapper Brie Runway performing a slowed-down version of 1990s classic Rhythm of the Night.
I do like that song. John Lewis is exploring a potential move away from its 100% staff ownership model. In a bid to drive investment, the high street brand hopes to raise up to £2 billion by selling a minority stake in the business.
Leaders at 3UK have admitted the business is unsustainable without mergers to Vodafone, as it's spending more than it's earning.
Well, Visit Britain and Visit England helped to boost visitor spend by £673 million between April 21 and June 22, thanks to dedicated marketing campaigns suggesting that international tourism is showing signs of continued strong recovery.
Greggs ranks as the strongest brand in the restaurant sector globally, according to Brand Finance.
Wow. Well, Jameson's new global campaign, Arrive Like a Local, in partnership with Irish Distillers, will be exclusive to global travel retail and is launching at over 35 airports.
And finally, the artificial intelligence company OpenAI has released GPT-4, its latest version of the AI system which powers ChatGPT, which made headlines when it was launched at the end of 2022. Now, Pascal, all of these news items are worthy of of a lot of discussion. I actually had a lot of difficulty narrowing it down to three that I want to talk about. I mean, the John Lewis thing is fascinating because the staff ownership model is one thing that they're absolutely renowned for. You know, they get so many plaudits from him, you know, from people who review styles of employment and styles of company structure for the way that they've built their business. But we'll not dwell upon them today. I did want to talk about TikTok because it's a sort of Marmite thing, isn't it, this TikTok? And obviously there's all this potential hoo-ha of all the security breaches potentially, and the fact that it's Chinese owned, and is there some sort of Chinese conspiracy to harvest all the data of the people that are using it, etc., etc. I know that a lot of it has been banned from parts of the United States. I mean, I have to say, it doesn't seem to me stupid to say to government people, don't use TikTok on a work phone. I mean, when I was in big corporate, my work phone just had email and the sort of internal email system and website on it. That was it. They wouldn't let us put anything on. So I can understand why a government mobile probably shouldn't have TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn, or anything on it, just in case. But what do you think? Is this really a problem, or is it just some conspiracy theory like any other conspiracy theory that we've heard over the last few years, some of which are utterly insane?
Well, I mean, to your point, I'm pretty sure I posted on LinkedIn earlier this week about, because I was the news was more like, I was thinking, well, looking back in my days in corporate, our IT policy was so stringent that would have never have happened. You know, people putting social media or apps without, you know, getting checked by the IT department because of security. Because I mean, literally, the combination mobile phone and social media app is just a perfect combination for crime to happen, from stealing your data to taking over. And when you work in government and when you work in corporate, it is known that there is a way for your phone to listen in, even if it is turned off.
Yeah.
I remember my younger brother was working for quite a famous food producer in France, and they were told to leave their phones at their desk if they went into a meeting room, and the meeting room had been actually designed to cut the noise because they had evidence that the competition could listen in.
Yeah.
So you begin with just that, and then add on to that, obviously, a foreign power who is not particularly, you know, well known for their approach to privacy, to kind of, you know, everything else that would come with it. Interestingly, at the time of recording, we're 24 hours after the CEO of TikTok having to address the US Senate and answering a number of questions. But what people are saying is, because of the position is, it is already essentially breaching data privacy and security. The questioning was actually very imbalanced. There was no attempt to learn about what really happens at TikTok and their link with the Chinese government. It was more, I have decided that you are essentially wrong, and let me therefore question you in a manner in which is going to confirm my current position. So it was very difficult for the general public to know by the end of the questioning whether or not TikTok is guilty of malpractice. It just knew that a bunch of people didn't like them very, very much. And then the defense from TikTok, and I have some sympathy, saying, well, why us and not YouTube or Facebook or Meta, for that matter, who have misbehaved in the past? So people are saying, is this some form of protectionism, you know, to protect the interests of the US by essentially with false accusation? And the challenge, Roger, is that we will never know, because unless TikTok can reveal all, we'll never know. But on the basis that, you know, because my memory is the IT policy that I had as a young kind of employee, they were so stringent. That would have been a conversation. You would not have TikTok on your business phone.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, it does. I agree with you about the Senate thing. It does feel as if they're guilty until proven innocent, which is definitely not the way to do it. But then again, you know, maybe they should have been a bit more open, as indeed, as you say, should have Meta and the others should have been a bit more open about some of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes. Now, what do you think, Pascal, about Greggs ranking as the strongest brand in the restaurant sector. Now, I was actually quite flabbergasted when I read this, because I had just assumed that it would be something like McDonald's or Burger King or one of the other big American, food chains like Kentucky Fried Chicken or Wendy's or something like that. But good old-fashioned British Greggs. And from anybody who's listening to the show who isn't from the UK, Greggs is pretty much on every single high street in the United Kingdom, and sometimes on every high street many times. And it's a sandwich shop, but you can buy pies, you can buy pasties, you can buy all sorts of food, and it's the sort of place that people will go to lunch if they are working in an office. They'll go to Greggs. But I'd never classed it in the category of, a restaurant global brand. I just thought it was a British thing. But here we are, Greggs ranking as the biggest restaurant sector brand globally. Wow.
It's brilliant, isn't it? But actually, you've got to recognize that they have worked very hard and very cleverly on their brand for many years. So for me, that's the results of maybe decades, but certainly the last 10 years. If you think about the coup of being one of the catering brand for the 2012 Olympic Games, to be present at airport, which is probably the link there as well. And what I like about Greggs is they have essentially crafted the sandwiches. They have a unique taste and they have a unique recipe. The bread is unique to theirs as well, because everything is done obviously in house, and the range of pie, which is leaning into sometimes regional culture and preferences. So they know who they are, and they have claimed that space, and they do an enormous amount of work with charities as well, breakfast clubs and the likes with schools. And I think, to me, that's just what it takes, so essentially they've become almost like an overnight sensation. It's taken them 20 years, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. And they have some lovely little touches. And again, recently I was reading an article on how Greggs works, and I didn't even know this, but when you actually learn about it, you realize it's absolutely beautiful. But they have this whole range of bakes and pies and everything. You can buy a steak bake, you can buy a chicken bake, there's a cheese and onion bake, meat pie, whatever you want. And each of their pies has a different pattern actually on the pastry. Yeah. And it means that the staff can recognize, because let's face it, a pie looks like a pie, doesn't it, unless you know. But the staff will know, well, that's a steak bake because it's got that pattern, that's a chicken bake because it's got that pattern. But of course, all the patterns look appealing and draw people in as well. So absolutely gorgeous piece of subliminal marketing going on there, which actually helps the staff be more efficient. I think it's fabulous. And finally, I did wonder whether to bring this one up, Pascal, but in the end I just had to. ChatGTP, my goodness, now they've released a more up-to-date version that's even cleverer. And the world seems to have gone ChatGTP crazy at the moment, or at least the marketing world has gone ChatGTP crazy at the moment. Every single article I read about these days is somebody coming up with a course on how to use ChatGTP, here are 5,000 prompts to make your use of ChatGTP better. There are people who, let's face it, 2 years ago they were NFT experts, last year they were metaverse experts, and now they're ChatGTP marketing people. We're embarrassing ourselves here. ChatGTP will have its uses, but you're setting the scene here for mediocrity. And all of these people who are ramming on about ChatGTP, you're talking yourself out of a job. You're creating a scenario where potentially, an agency conversation might be, imagine a corporate finds out that its agency is using ChatGTP. They'll say, well, why do we need the agency? By all means, we need to find a way of harnessing maybe the mundane tasks that this can take over. But for goodness sake, it seems to me that we're wishing away our creative ability to be human and to create human stuff and passing it over to this machine. Don't get so excited about it. Let's just tone down the hype a bit. Am I overreacting?
No, and I'm going to keep my reply very short because of my selection for this week's content spotlight. But ultimately, it is tiresome for you and I to observe, over the decades, our profession being essentially always summarized by a hack or a trick or a shortcut or a cheat, whether it's been SEO, whether it's social media, email marketing, particularly the digital stuff. And for me, you would not dream of having this conversation for things like legal services or HR or finance. I mean, you can imagine someone says to you, I'll do your tax return, but that won't be me. I'll ask an AI to do that for you. I'm going to build a case to defend yourself against basically an injustice done to you. I don't know what it is about marketing and sales in particular, whereby people literally, as you and I have observed over time, oh, look, I've got PowerPoint on my computer, therefore I'm going to start to present well. And this kind of strange link between access to technology that can accelerate the appearance of an output, equal skills and intelligence. And I think to your point, and I've been talking about this and with others, by the way, about this idea of when you are part of the silent majority, are you also part of the problem? And do we need to be a bit more robust and be more vocal and warning people? Because one thing that is very tiresome as well is the targeting of adverts. So because you now do things like the show notes for 2GigsMountain podcast, now my feed on Instagram in particular and Facebook is full of idiots who are just moving their hands around, pointing different part of the screen to list the top 10 AI solutions. Now, let's put it this way. I've gone ahead with the benefit of the doubt. So, okay, well, maybe there's something else. I've gone ahead and I tested someone's 10 recommended AI platforms, and they were all rubbish. I mean, to the point where it was not usable in the business context. It was maybe amusing in the social context, but not usable. And I've discovered little by little those individuals, the one that you are mentioning here today, they don't even use the AI platform that they talk about. So, yeah, you're right. We need to start to be the voice of reason, warn people, but just say, and by the way, can I just also mention for you and I, the challenge is that we've been mentioning AI-powered solutions for at least since 2016, when Google did the demonstration of Google AI during Google I/O, more acronyms there. So it's also very hard for you and I to be excited because we've known about it for 7 years now.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, we very rarely hear about NFTs anymore. And those people who were NFT experts 2 years ago, they went on to the metaverse. Let's face it, we very rarely hear about the metaverse anymore. And it seems that Facebook have realised what a complete arse they've made of that, and they've moved on. So I'm hoping that give it another 6 months to a year, and all these idiots that have jumped onto the ChatGPT bandwagon will also have moved on to whatever the next thing will come around. One thing I would just want to finish this section off in, please everybody, if somebody comes along and tells you that they're an expert in something, check it out. Pascal and I, without wanting to blow our own trumpets, and I don't think we'd blow our own trumpets enough, to be perfectly honest, Pascal, but we've been doing marketing for over 25 years. It takes a long time to become expert in something. ChatGPT launched towards the back end of 2022. We're only in the third month of 2023. It is not possible for somebody to be an expert in something that's only been around for a couple of months. It's lunacy to think that they can be experts in that sort of thing. And if they aren't experts, then there's got to be something going on, and they're probably trying to take advantage. So be wary of people who call themselves experts. Check out to find out whether they really are.
And we begin with Twitter, who is accused of false advertising. Despite removing verification for hundreds and thousands of accounts last week, Twitter has backtracked and reinstated its blue tick for some users.
Bud Light's marketing boss takes leave of absence following the backlash that their marketing created by using the TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney to mark her 1-year anniversary of publicly identifying as transgender.
Dame Judi Dench has returned for Money Supermarket's latest campaign, which sees the 7 money-saving expert entrusted with helping 7 different people across 7 different cities save serious money.
The latest GfK Consumer Confidence Barometer shows consumer confidence has risen for the third month running, but without concrete good news on the wider economy. The UK is still a long way from emerging from this protracted period of collective gloomy sentiment.
While the Co-op is following the example of supermarket rival Sainsbury's and Tesco's by offering price discounts to loyalty scheme members. A refund of £2 per pound spent can be earned and paid into a digital wallet account.
Pets at Home has relaunched its brand identity with a new creative platform which looks to unite all the different elements of the businesses, which also include vets for pets and pets grooming.
UK sandwich shop Pret A Manger will soon open its first store in India. According to Pret's CEO, Panu Christo, the shop's frontage and interior will be a recreation of its UK shops, but the food will be adapted to local preferences and habits.
And finally, BrewDog has brought back its infamous gold can competition, which originally led to complaints last year when solid gold cans turned out to be gold-plated. It says it has checked the small print this time. I actually quite like that. We've talked about BrewDog a few times on the show before, haven't we, Pascal? And they always do things a little bit quirky. Actually, admittedly, sometimes they upset the apple cart a bit, don't they? They upset a few people, and they have been criticised because of their association with the World Cup in Qatar. But I quite like this because, yes, they did create a little bit of annoyance last year when they claimed, not that anybody should have really believed them, I guess, that they had solid gold beer cans, which actually just turned out to be gold-plated ones. And it was a bit of a Charlie and the Chocolate Factory vibe, I think. But I like the way that they've almost admitted that mistake by saying this year that they are gold-plated because we've gone away and we've checked the small print.
Yeah, they do that, but also, and maybe that's just what happens, with communication. When I first came across the expression solid gold, I didn't take it literally myself. I thought it was the expression about being genuine, about quality and so on, because that's the expression. I mean, much younger people than you and I would say that's solid, and then that means that it's obviously a high quality or care and attention has been spent on it. But yeah, they do that. But maybe that's also part of the territory of when you do many campaigns and you are in that spirit of experimentation. If I may use the pun, you're not going to hit gold every single time.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, let's just go back to the first news item, Pascal, we talked about, which was Twitter. And this whole business around this blue tick. Honestly, I mean, just for anybody that doesn't know, if you have a blue tick on Twitter prior to Elon Musk taking over, the blue tick was almost verification that you were who you were. And blue ticks were usually given to people like journalists or famous celebrities or well-known speakers. So people like Deborah Meaden would have a blue tick. Somebody like the President of the United States would have a blue tick, etc., etc. And one of the things that Musk's done is he's decided to take the blue tick away from everybody. And if you want to have a blue tick, you've got to buy this Twitter Blue, which is about $11 a month or $8 a month, depending upon whether you sign up on desktop or on mobile. And everybody's losing their cookies over this. So on the one hand, you've got all the people who did have blue ticks before getting really annoyed that they're losing their blue ticks, and then Twitter have sort of backtracked a bit because Elon Musk has said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll buy Twitter Blue for these people who are annoyed. So some of them have got their blue ticks back, but it doesn't say verified by Twitter. It still says that they're subscribed to Twitter Blue, so it's basically Musk is paying for it. And then you've got a load of these other celebrities that have been saying, anybody who has a blue tick now, I'm going to unfollow, because if you have a blue tick, that means you're supporting Musk by paying into Twitter. So it just seems to me that Twitter is descending further and further into the gutter. What do you think?
It just feels like there's been no thinking about this, because all you have to do is get a few bright people, there must be some left at Twitter, not just Elon Musk, and do some scenario planning and kind of go, well, what is likely reactions from good, bad, and ugly, and more importantly, your point about the origin of the blue tick was essentially because of copycat accounts. So someone who was obviously a real brand, personal brand, or indeed a organizational brand, would go back to Twitter and say, no, this is not me. Somebody's pretending to be me and either sharing false information or whatever. So they say, well, we're going to do that to solve this problem. There can only be one Roger Edwards, so your account will be verified through a process of, and you're going to get a blue tick so that the copycats will be essentially found out. So now you're in a position where you can have a blue tick by paying your $8 or $11 a month. And what's happened is people have done that. So when the brands have had their blue tick removed, then the liars and the cheaters went back on Twitter with fake accounts. The whole thing's a mess.
Absolutely right. I mean, I've long since thought, wouldn't it be easy just to solve this by saying, if you want to have a Twitter account, you've got to upload some piece of identification that proves who you are, and therefore everybody gets verified, and that's the end of it. And that would solve a lot of problem with these copycat accounts. But of course, we know that people like to have anonymous accounts on things like Twitter, possibly because they want to troll people, possibly because they want to be, a bit aggressive, whatever it might be, and to a certain extent, maybe Twitter and the social media platforms has pandered to that anonymity. But it seems to me there's an easy way to fix this, but I don't know whether I would pay for it. Not at the moment.
No, and you're right. The backlash around, you're one of those who've paid for the blue tick, and suddenly your own kind of credibility has been hampered by that. It's just very, very difficult, but ultimately, I'm sorry to say, Roger, it's down to lack of thinking from the outset, and that's unforgivable.
Yeah, I think we go on about strategy a lot on the marketing on the Two Geeks in the Marketing podcast, and this is a clear lack of strategy. They're just making it up as they go along. It's almost as if every day is a new day, and every day they just wing it, and it's not good enough. So the other one I wanted to just get your opinion on was this whole idea of Co-op joining other supermarkets like Sainsbury's and Tesco and offering price discounts to loyalty scheme members. Now, again, there's been a bit of a backlash in the UK media about this, saying that it's unfair. I don't have a problem with it. We've got loyalty scheme with Tesco. We don't shop in Sainsbury's often enough to have one. And every year, Tricia gains enough of these vouchers to get a significant discount off our Christmas shopping. And that's what you get for being part of a loyalty scheme. Is it any different than joining the Executive Club of British Airways and getting discounts on flights? I have to say, I don't get particularly excited about 2p per pound. It doesn't feel to me as if that's going to help me much in the current economic climate. But what do you think? It's okay, isn't it?
It's absolutely fine. Yeah. What I will say is, if you really want to compete, it would be down to the messaging, down to the execution. I know that there's been recently some kerfuffle, I think, between Lidl and one of the others. Forgive me, memory is failing me. It may have been Tesco's or Sainsbury's, whereby some of the messaging felt, very, very much like a copy, very much like the Caterpillar scenario. so for me, I'm almost unimpressed by the lack of novelty about it. It's almost like, well, let's follow the trend. There has to be supplementary ways for your loyalty scheme members to feel like the loyalty is being rewarded. So the 2p to a pound is one. I think there has to be other things that I'm sure the customer service and marketing team can kind of come up with. And we begin with news that the grocery inflation has fallen to 16.5% in 4 weeks to 11 June 2023. Despite this being the lowest inflation this year so far, it is still the sixth highest monthly rate of inflation recorded since 2008.
A survey of 3,000 adults from IPA touchpoints across the UK shows consumers are taking it upon themselves to ease the effects of inflation, with more than 60% of customers now actively looking for the lowest price when shopping.
And the average time spent on social media platforms now stands at 2 hours and 1 minute per day for European users. That's a drop of 4 minutes, Roger, compared to the same period last year.
Kraft Heinz Chief Growth Officer Diana Frost says tech should be viewed as an enabler, and that marketing's core focus must always be the consumer. Never forget humanity. If we don't have humans and consumers at the centre of everything we do, then we've lost.
Here. Well, Lidl has won a court injunction to stop Tesco using the club card logo. This could cost Tesco £8 million to remove its club card prices marketing assets. This is their second loss against Lidl at the High Court in their long-standing trademark dispute.
According to research from Bayes Business School, the University of Missouri and the University of Arizona, it turns out that the most liked brand slogans are often the least memorable, and the most memorable are the least liked.
Okay, well, Idris Elba has teamed up with Mark Boyan, Miroma Group founder and chief executive, to launch Silly Face, a global marketing and content business with the first 3 offices in London, New York, and Los Angeles.
And Netflix UK has partnered Out and Out London to host an immersive maze based on the fantasy series The Witcher. Once visitors find their way out, they will be able to digitally capture their achievements at the Witcher bathhouse. Now, I wanted to just go back and talk about that research from the Bayes Business School about the most liked brand slogans are often the least memorable, and the most memorable are often the least liked. And the reason I wanted to just go over that is I was on a train coming back from London yesterday, Pascal, and you've travelled on trains in the UK as frequently as I do, and they have this slogan which they use to get people to be aware to look out for bags that might have been misplaced or maybe even look a bit suspicious. And the slogan is "See it, say it, sorted." And I remember reading an article that is one of the most hated brand straplines or slogans that a brand has ever come up with. However, I did bump into, by complete accident, the guy from the agency who actually came up with "See it, say it, sorted." And they said, yes, it is hated by everybody, but you know what? It absolutely works because everybody remembers it. So it almost backs up what this Bayes Business School thing is saying.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because when you reflect on it, we will have it, and sometimes it even sounds memorable but irritating or annoying. And I know that in marketing, I am a huge fan, Roger, of the rule of 3 and the alliteration, as many of my trainees will attest. And I kind of understand it. It's literally because of its kind of forced creation of finding the 3 words or the 3 tonality around the consonants and the vowels. It has an element of surely there's something better, smarter, or to say, and there is a version, but that version, of course, is nowhere near as memorable. And for marketers and communicators, people working in customer service, is that constant tension. I recently helped a French company prepare for a trade show in London. And this would be a new undertaking for them to actually sell their products to the UK markets. I'm bringing this element of culture. For confused viewers and listeners, I spent most of my life in the UK. I've gone native, hence why I'm able to kind of give that service. And we came up with this strapline. Well, forgive me, I came up with this strapline. I presented it to them, and they absolutely hated it. I think both in English and in French. We went through the table. Eventually, it was actually the marketing lady said, "But I can see why this would work." And then eventually, they warmed to it, and they're still discussing it whether or not they're going to use it as part of the strapline to be on the stand in London. So I have first-hand experience with this idea of where can we capture someone's attention, but also the way in which the phrase is finally kind of constructed can be a source of annoyance, and yet people remember it.
Yeah, I know. It's fascinating, isn't it? In fact, I almost chose that piece to be my content spotlight this week because I felt it was so interesting. Let's talk about inflation, because certainly in the UK, inflation is staggeringly high and prices are going up all the time. On top of that, we've also got this awful mortgage time bomb where, because interest rates are going up now and people are coming to the end of their fixed rates, when their rates change to the next fixed term, it could be significantly higher and people are struggling. And I thought the first 2 news items about how inflation may have fallen slightly, it's still the highest recorded since 2008. And of course, this other survey suggesting that people are genuinely now actively trying to find the lowest price. And I'm finding I'm doing that myself, Pascal. On a Saturday morning, it's well known that after I teach my balance class, I always go down to the harbour at 𝗙𝗂𝗄 and have myself a coffee. And earlier this year, I noticed that the coffee in the place where I buy it from, the Costa Coffee, had gone up by 15 pence. And I just thought, you're going to have to stop buying coffee at this place and bring your own on a Saturday because, it's £2.95. Anyway, last week I forgot. I just woke up in the morning. I was a bit bleary-eyed. I forgot to make my own coffee and take it down. And I found it had gone up again to £3.20.
Wow.
So within the space of 6 months, that's 35p added to the cost of a coffee from the place that I go to on a Saturday. And that's happening everywhere. And of course, people are starting to do what I do, take your own coffee or look for the cheaper alternative. And marketers have got to build this into their plans. And we all know that price is one of the very important aspects of the marketing mix. So, everybody's really going to have to look very carefully at the prices that they charge. None of us want to cut the prices that we charge, but that's what people are looking for at the moment.
They are, and there's so many evidence of that. I mean, we mentioned in the news the Lidl, Tesco, 𝗃𝗃𝗃𝗃. I heard on the radio actually a bit of the history of Lidl and Aldi, the two brands, and how they were ridiculed by the very brands who are now copying in a kind of low price, high quality kind of formula, which I think has been interesting. But in the history of Lidl, and then I'll come back to what you just mentioned, the breakthrough in terms of becoming even more popular than they are, strangely, was in the quality of the lighting used in their premises. So when they first started, it was kind of one of those where literally you had cardboard boxes opened up on the floor and people would help themselves to, that kind of simple food and drinks. So then they introduced the shelves, but where they managed to attract the higher spenders is by literally improving the light condition inside the store, because at the time it was being very, very dim. But going back to what you just said, the car companies are now, which is really, really telling for me, they're now promoting reconditioned and repaired second-hand cars as part of their main offers. We've got all sort of examples. And I think for me, with regard to the UK and Western Europe, the telltale sign, as we are recording this at the start of the summer months, roughly, Roger, is going to be the results of the traveling and the revenue from that industry, because between that, home buying and car buying, they're usually the three indicators of the mood of the consumers out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And finally, Pascal, what did you make of this news item about the average time that people spend on social media platforms? Now, it actually went down. I mean, okay, 4 minutes is the average it's gone down by, but it has gone down. And I just wonder whether this backs up some of the stuff that we've been talking about, about how Twitter has become a lot more toxic, how people just get frustrated by the algorithms on platforms like LinkedIn. Maybe that's been balanced out by the increased popularity of TikTok and Instagram stories, but I'm very surprised that it's gone down a bit.
Yeah, and again, that could have been a content spotlight, because you could deep dive into the research. So it all depends on the definition of social media platforms, because Ofcom, however, would say we spend more time online consuming video content. So if you exclude YouTube from that research, which I suspect they have, then I would say, there's a combination of, novelty factor is completely gone. I mean, in some cases, we are celebrating maybe 20 years or 15 years of a particular platform, which is a long time. And we can see from the degree of like, comment, and share, which are now almost non-existent on social media, that the content consumers are just consuming the content, get on with their day. But in terms of accessing news items, tutorials, and the likes as video format, is still going very, very strong. So it may well be that that's what's happening, is that people are still online. Of course, they have mobile phones, laptop, tablets, and more, but they've migrated towards what would be deemed to be actually probably long-form content, and maybe they want to inform themselves better. For social media marketers and for those who are using social media as an element of the strategy, is something we need to pay attention to, because therefore the time budget is reduced even further. And how do we become someone's favorite in a very noisy, messy social media world?
Yeah, it certainly still does seem to be very noisy and very messy. Wow, Pascal, we could talk about some of the other items that we have there. The 𝗔𝗽𝗋𝗿𝗋 one is quite interesting, but I think we need to move on.